everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Switch On Season 2. It's an honor to have with us today anh Thanh Truong, who is the director of Aus Asia Produce. Hi, anh Thanh. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So can you tell a little bit about yourself so that the audience know who you are?
Sure. I'm Tan. I was born here in Australia, but my parents are from Vietnam. They were migrants here after the war. And we have a fruit business.
That's a short and sweet introduction.
That's right. No, my family have been in the fruit industry for more than 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah.
not just my parents, but all of my uncles, my cousins. And I've been in the industry for about 14 years now. I used to work for one of the supermarkets as a buyer. But I love fruit and veg. And our business, we distribute across Australia and we service the Asian Australian community.
Yeah.
So predominantly focus on fruits and vegetables that we eat at home, like ramung or, different ones like Chinese chives for the Chinese community or maybe certain type of grapes for the Korean community. So our focus is to service community and also make sure that quality is always very good, because in fruit and veg we always see things that, when you're on the shelf, they don't look good or they're whittling or they're turning brown. That's been our primary focus. So that's me in a nutshell.
That sounds amazing. So you are the one who producing the stuff I buy at the supermarket.
Well, no, we're actually not a producer. So we're not the farmer.
Yeah.
We're a wholesaler and distributor. And what I mean by that is you can be a farmer, but in the modern way of our supply chain, the farmer doesn't sell directly to a consumer.
Yeah.
And I don't like to use the word middleman, but we are a middleman that add value in the supply chain.
Definitely.
So, in Australia here, it's dominated by the two supermarkets in terms of fruit and vegetables. And they often source directly from a farmer. But for other communities, for fruit stores or restaurants, any cafe that you eat around this beautiful city that we live in, they all have to buy their produce through distributors and wholesalers. So we are a part of that chain between the farmer and a consumer in all those different spaces where we eat food.
I see. That's amazing. So how did you start your journey? Like, beside being that be your family business, but obviously, like, if you don't like it, you wouldn't stay in it, right? So how did you start it, and what's your most favorite things about, like, being the one who distribute fruit and veggies around?
No, it's a really interesting question, because when I was a kid, I did not like fruit and vegetables.
As every other kid.
Because I had to live in the fruit and veg store with my parents. So it was really hard, because I grew a disdain, a kind of hate for it, because I was around it every day. Almost like, if your parents own a restaurant and you have to be in the kitchen peeling, the peas, right? But I studied finance, Chinese and Japanese languages. And I was an accountant for a little bit. And I was lucky enough to work for one of the supermarkets, Coles. And in their graduate program, I found a love for food and what happens behind the food before it gets to, us as consumers. So I ended up going into the fruit and vegetable department as a buyer. And that's when I realized that growing up, my parents taught me so much about fruit and vegetables.
I see.
More than most people would. And I visited many farms in Northern Territory, in Queensland, overseas in Vietnam and in China and Thailand. And so fruit and vegetables to me is alive. And I don't see it as $1.99 or $2 per kilo. I see it as something that is an experience. And that brought me to work in the family business. And so I've been in the family business for nearly 12 years now. And, joining my father was very interesting, because working with your parents is very interesting.
It's definitely not easy.
No, we have a lot of arguments.
But
at the end of the day, I love fruit and veg, and I love seeing other people enjoy fruit and veg. So, whether, Vicky, you love watermelon. So when you eat a really cold watermelon on a hot day and it's very sweet, there's nothing like that experience. And I want to make sure that Australians can choose the best produce so they have a good experience every time.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So what's your favorite like fruit and vegetables?
Yeah, my favorite fruit is cherries
Oh, mm-hmm.
because I think when you have a good cherry that is sour and sweet and crunchy, for me, that experience, uh, you can't stop eating.
Yep.
And when you can't
It's
stop
addictive.
eating, yeah, it's addictive, right? Like maybe when you eat mangosteen or when you eat lychees. And when you can't stop eating, for me, that doesn't matter whether it's really sour or it's really sweet. If you can't stop eating it, that's a good fruit to you. And so cherries for me, some often during this time of the year,
Yeah.
when the cherry season is out, I can't stop eating it.
Oh.
And so for me, cherries is my favorite experience. And so I use that communication tool to help others explain why they love fruit and vegetables. So, for instance, what is your favorite vegetable, Vicky?
Oh, my favorite vegetables. I would say is oh, that's a hard question. I would say it's rau muống as a
Yeah.
Vietnamese. Yeah.
And
I
what
love it.
do you like it fried with just garlic or with
I
like
love it stir fried with garlic.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're at home and you've got a bowl of rice and there's ramung on the plate and you can't stop eating the ramung and you want more of it, that for me is not just about the cooking. It's about picking a really fresh ramung
That
that's
is
not
true.
stringy and old. And so our philosophy, not only as a business but for me, and why I love fruit and veg is if we have those experiences more and more and more, we will live healthier lives.
Yeah.
And so the goal, and not just as a business, but as a mission in my life, I'm very happy to be selling this product, but also it makes everybody happy. It makes everyone healthier. It makes your mum and your parents happy.
Eat green.
Eat green, that's it. So for me, I've been on a food journey.
Yeah.
As we all are. We all love food. And I think certainly Asian communities, certainly Vietnamese communities, we love fruit and veg. We love eating food. And I think we've brought a lot to the Australian community already. Just downstairs, you can see banh mi. When I was young, you could never imagine banh mi being in the middle of the city or pho. And so I think Vietnamese culture here in Australia and Vietnamese food culture, including fruit and veg, has a really bright future.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited like to hear that because as a Vietnamese living in Australia, I was really amazed by how much options that we can have and then how much like it's really easy to access to our like cultural backgrounds. And on that, like given your experience in the industry that you say 12 years, like how do you see the Vietnamese and Asian produce contribute to the Australian market?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, there's a booming Asian demographic here in Australia. So there's a lot more Asian migrants coming to Australia. So we have a growing market to service. And that's really positive because, as I mentioned, Asian communities love food and they want to eat all kinds of food. Not just Vietnamese food, not just Chinese food, not just Thai food.
Yes.
And so we really like to engage in the communities, which means that we're going to need to grow the produce for the restaurants, for those communities. And so it's up to the Asian diaspora, people like yourself who have come from Vietnam, to bring some of the favorite fruits and vegetables or the favorite dishes that you want to eat. Having grown up in Ho Chi Minh, there might be some dishes that require some kind of herb that you want here in Australia, but you can't find. But you might be able to find that in 5 or 10 years' time. And so it's only people like yourselves that can contribute to Australian society and contribute to our community by giving us those small cultural fruit and veg nuances that nobody else can. And so even though my family and certainly my father has done that from 30 years ago with things like Hue and Ramung, there's a new raft of migration, whether it's from Hanoi or Hue or wherever it is in Vietnam or other countries, I'm excited because there's a lot of different dishes and a lot of vegetables and fruits that I want to eat and I'm excited for in the future.
Yes, I'm really excited to hear that because now whenever I cook Vietnamese dishes, it's not too hard to find herbs and everything because we have an Asian market right next to my house. But to find a very niche one, we can still find that. For example, something like rau yam. It's not easy to find at all. Yeah. So I'm really excited to see all that coming in. Yeah. But it's kind of it's very easy for Vietnamese or Asian audience to accept the Vietnamese or Asian produce because we are familiar with it. But how would you say about the awareness or acceptance of more Australian or Western audience to Asian produce?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And having worked for the supermarkets and also servicing the Asian community, there is a lot of cultural disconnect between traditional Australia and the new wave of migrants that are very accepting of produce from Asia. I think that there are some really good cases where Asian produce has been a shining light, like dragon fruit, tan long.
Yeah.
Australians and Westerners love tan long.
Yeah.
And Australians don't grow enough of it. We only grow it in a small window for 2 months of the year, or 3 months if you push the boundary. So there's 9 months where we do not have tan long. But Vietnam has been able to produce the quality that we require. And now Vietnamese tan long is now 90 to 95% of the market here in Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it services the other 9 months.
Yes.
And so I think that there are some fruits and vegetables that can play a really important role in that adoption of Asian produce. On the flip side, Jai Yai or Jan Yang, those two products have not been able to penetrate the Australian market or traditional Australian market because their shelf life is very short. Not many Australians know about the fruit and vegetable. And the price point is also much more expensive by the time it gets here. So there's Australians are both great at accepting new waves of products, but then also resistant. Because in Australia, we're really lucky. Did you know that in Australia, not like any country in the entire world, in Australia, we can grow everything. We can grow everything in Northern Australia where it's really hot, all the way to the coldest things in Tasmania.
Yeah.
No other country in the world can do that.
Yep.
Not even the Great China or America. They don't have those two temperature zones.
Yeah, weather condition.
Yeah. So we have a very protectionist government and protectionist country, which is good and bad because we have a great environment. We don't have a lot of the pests, but then also there's a lot of challenges that we face here in Australia with importing product into Australia.
That's really interesting to hear because I was really surprised when I first see Chai Vai in Woolworth because I'm like, wow, this has been a really big step for Asian produce or Vietnamese produce coming into a big supermarket like that. But I think what you say is also really makes sense because those are at a quite high price point and not a lot of traditional Australian know about it. So how would you recommend the Vietnamese farmers or the Vietnamese business to raise the awareness for those Vietnamese produce?
I think entering the traditional market is extremely hard. And I think there are steps because with dragon fruit, there's a huge trend for dragon fruit, especially with smoothie bowls. And it's a good fruit platter fruit where you can put in a fruit platter. And so they're the low-hanging fruit. I mean, that's a joke, but it's a good pun. They're low-hanging fruit. And so I think, potentially targeting easier portfolios within fruit and veg is an easier start.
Yeah.
But I think, we live in the 21st century and we should rely more on social media. I think we need to meet customers where they're at. They no longer, read newspapers. They no longer read magazines. They rarely watch TV. And so I think there is a huge lack of avant-garde or at the forefront of marketing of where it should be, especially for a young demographic and young market that will more easily accept this information, whilst not to disregard the older generation, but they
For sure.
they like
Yes.
what they like, and it's harder for them to change what they know. And so I think for new products, we should often look at these new younger demographics. And I'll give you a really good example. We did a wave of social media marketing for grapes from Korea for the Chinese market on WeChat here in Australia.
Yeah.
That's almost unheard of in traditional marketing media in Australia, where you're predominantly focused on radio, TV, newspaper ads, or local community
Magazine.
the ones that you put in the news your mailboxes.
Yeah.
And that was a success because a lot of that fruit and veg was sold online. And whether it's Vietnam or China, we're seeing a lot more fruit and veg being sold online in this new wave of marketing. And so I think if we're trying to promote a new product, I think trying to focus on where the customers are at is going to be more important every year, every month, as we I guess as the internet and the way that we consume information changes.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also, like from what you say, I also picked up that it's really important to have someone who understand like the local audience, the local market, but also understand like the new wave of like information, the new wave of how things work in order to promote it to the right person in the right way. Because as you mentioned, now everything like it runs really fast, like social media and also the new generation. If they accept the products, it will have like a really long way to go. Yeah. So so based on that, like besides just promoting, what are the other challenges that you see that Vietnamese or like Asia produce business have to face when they come to Australia?
In fruit and vegetable or in general?
In fruit and vegetables, yeah.
There's a lot of regulation here in Australia. So we have the most strict biosecurity in the world. Even when you fly here from the airplane, they check everything that
They
you
check
have.
everything.
Yeah. And I think that's also a good thing because we also live in a beautiful country and we want to keep it that
Protected,
way too.
yes.
So, and everybody who comes to Australia knows that we have a very green, a very clean country. But there are a lot of challenges in that way. And as I mentioned, we have a very protectionist government. We can grow everything. So I think understanding those rules before coming to Australia and trying to communicate, trying to partner with businesses that understand those rules already is probably going to be a fast track to not making mistakes, like sending fruit and veg here and then having to send it back because it doesn't meet regulation or whatnot. So I think there are a lot of the regulation hoops that a business would need to jump through. And I think fruit and veg is a very long-term game because you might lose money or you might win money, but fruit and veg, there's so many different seasons, and so it's very unpredictable, unlike other products. So if you're not in it for the long term, it can be very difficult because it's not an easy entry. The barriers to entry into the market are very high.
Yeah. And also I think that you really need to educate the buyers, the audience, because they need time to like accept the product as well. So as you say, it's a long-term game for the businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having been in the industry for more than a decade, I can see how things change every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And I think if you go in with that strategy, it'll be much easier because you're not going to be jumping to be like, oh, we need to sell, X amount this year because, fruit and veg is not like cryptocurrency. It doesn't go up and down like that.
Yeah.
It's a very slow burn where they're like, oh, lychees, oh, I don't want to try it. But then your friend might buy it and then they might try it and then they might like it and then they'll buy it next time and then it's not the season anymore. You have to wait till the next year. Yeah. And then the next year they'll see it and then they'll buy it and then slowly it'll come on board. But, we all have to eat fruit and veg. So it's a very stable industry to be in. And I think from that point of view, sometimes it's not the most exciting thing because, not everywhere. There's bananas every day. You know, it's not that exciting.
Yeah.
But I think over time we can see that, you know, we can change the variety of bananas. We can make it better eating. Maybe we'll cook the bananas. There's always a slow process and steps to growing the market. And I think the industry has a lot of growth, but it's not fast. So I think somebody who's after something really exciting, really fast is probably not that space. But yeah,
you need to be patient.
You need to be patient. And also, it's something really, you know, I'm really proud to sell fruit and veg as well. Like, it's something very honorable to sell and be proud of. Unlike, you know, maybe selling, you know, cigarettes or something where you can make money, but it's not doing people good.
Yeah, I see.
So I love that about our industry.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. So, like, in your 12 years of experience, do you have any memorables, like challenges or any memorables, for example, business case that you want to share for everyone?
Well, I think the one that I mentioned about, you know, selling things on the internet online is really groundbreaking. In 2017, we had our first customer who sold fruit online. And that was really groundbreaking at the time because fruit and veg is very traditional. You know, street
people
market,
go to the market,
street store, supermarket. Why would somebody want to buy fruit and veg online? Well, quality, supply chain, the speed at which it gets to you. And I think today people are having more poor experiences, and I think selling things online, building a story behind it, branding it, having good marketing, but also having that consistent good quality, when you're able to do that, you can grow an online market, which is almost devoid of traditional market. It's a completely different market. And there's one point in time where that paid really good dividends, and that was the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because here in Melbourne, we were in lockdown, and the online market for fruit boomed. It went from, you know, a few stores to nearly 100 stores in 1 month. And then everyone was trying to sell online. And we were the only ones that had products that were unique, that were special, that were different from what you'd buy in the supermarkets. And so moving that forward into trying to do marketing to the specific Chinese market, you can do the same for the Vietnamese market. Maybe target the younger audience on TikTok, maybe target the older audience on Facebook.
Definitely.
But if you don't build the brand, if you don't build that business case behind selling fruit and veg online and then transition to doing marketing, you're already many steps behind. So I think, you know, the world is moving much faster. And even though fruit and veg is a traditional industry, we definitely have room to grow and tech to absorb and adopt. And so that's very exciting. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future in fruit and veg here in Australia and across the world too.
That's very exciting to hear because I have started to buy fruits and veggie online exactly at the during the pandemic, because at that point there's no other options that you can do. But like any other like consumer, we still have that doubt about like whether it's a good product or not, like because when it's shipped to you, you cannot return it when it's already delivered. So the thing I really want to like, the thing about quality, I think is really important when it comes to like fruits and veggie produce, because that's something we consume. So we want it at the best quality when And once you earn the consumer trust, I think they will stay, like they will be a very loyal consumer once you earn their trust.
Yeah, and I think also because fruit and vegetables is, you know, when I go into a fruit and veg store, I see many different things. When I go into a fruit and veg store, I see many different things, not just what looks good. But when you buy fruit and veg online, you can buy produce that you don't see in a fruit store. You know, and unique stuff like soujin or mango. Things that are difficult. It might be very expensive, but if you can get good quality and if you want to treat yourself, then you'll buy it. And I think even though some fruits are really expensive, you have to think the reverse happens in the other countries. So, you know, we might have very cheap cherries here, but cherries might be really expensive in Vietnam.
It is.
And so, you know, there's a supply and demand aspect of it. But I think the online space of selling fruit and veg is great because it can give good experiences every time if a business is able to really control that. And I think for the established players in the market, they're not aware that they're not aware, they can't bring themselves to move and adopt new technology, just like every business. And so I think, you know, it is very exciting that that we have room to grow, and that a lot of this new space hasn't been taken yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, as we come to like the end of the podcast, there's one last question I want to ask you. I think you mentioned a lot about like how you're excited about the future of fruit and veggie produce, and especially like the international trade between Australia and other Asia country. But how would you envision like the fruit and veggie market here in Australia in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think you know, as Australia is growing more into Asia, we're seeing more trade agreements between countries like Vietnam, countries like Thailand, Korea, and Australia. And so we're going to see more unique produce come to Australia. At the same time, we're living in a cost of living crisis. So it's more easy to tell which fruit and veg might be successful. You know,
really?
because you know the most expensive fruit
Yeah,
is probably
for
not going to
sure.
have a big market.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think you know, in 3 to 5 years' time, we're going to see more fruit and vegetables from Asia here in Australia, but also more Australian produce in Asia as well, as we export
other
more.
way. Yeah.
But as you mentioned at the start, Vicky, understanding the cultural nuance, the local people that live here and what they need, that's really important. And
Yeah.
that's how people like my father and I can add value to the supply chain, because we understand the people that live in the areas and how we can match that with produce overseas, whether that's packaging, whether that's the type of produce, or whether that's the grading of produce, or even the cultural significance, like Mam Nui Wa, or you know, maybe you know there is no dragon fruit at that time, and we needed dragon fruit because it has a special meaning to put on the platter
Yeah.
during Lunar New Year. All of those small things make a difference. And so I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see more produce, but then also the right kind of produce at the right time.
Yeah. This is just a quick question out of my curiosity because you mentioned Sorean before.
Yes.
So I'm curious about like, from your experience, how does the traditional Australian perceive that special kind of like fruit? Because even for Asian or even for Vietnamese, it's not an easy fruit to like to accept, or not everyone can have it. Yeah, so do you have any special experience with Sorean?
Yeah, I'm a real champion for Sol Ying because I have had Sol Ying in so many countries: Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and there's a lot of cultural attachment to Sol Ying. In Western media, it's almost seen as negative, you know, stinky, you know,
Yeah.
it's the worst fruit, and it is hard for people to accept. And in saying that, Vietnam is going to be a huge juggernaut for Sol Ying. They're growing so much of it, they've become a big player in the global market,
Yes.
competing against the likes of Thailand and Malaysia. But I think the acceptance of Sol Ying comes with media, right?
Yeah.
How it's perceived. Who gets to say whether it's good or bad?
That's true. That's
And-
very subjective.
Very subjective. And I studied food systems and gastronomy, and I studied a lot of food media. And in food media, I have often brought this up, and we always talk about how in France and blue cheese, it's very smelly, and a lot of people don't like it. But people don't say it's disgusting, I hate it. They just say it's too strong, it's not for me.
Yeah.
But they don't say that for durian. So it's about changing the narrative. It's about you know, whether there are more Asian writers in Western media trying to convince or at least portray durian in a different light. I think the new wave of, you know, the new generation is more accepting of things, and we just have to push the right narrative for durian, in that if you don't like it, that's okay. It's an amazing looking fruit. It looks very difficult to open, and it's an experience.
That's
It's
true.
not just a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
And so I'm always going to be a champion for durian, but I think the narrative needs to change in the Western media, and I hope it will. But I know what also makes things viral on social media, and I think the narrative is hard to change when it's easier to tell the negative story.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Yeah, for sure. But I also agree with you that in order for the Australian or like any other market to accept a certain type of produce or like fruits and veggie, it's more than just the veggie and the fruit and the taste itself. It's a lot about like the environment, a lot about the narrative, a lot about like how people accept the culture and the cultural connection between the two countries or between the two culture. Yep. But I'm very excited to hear like the positive, like your positivity about the market. And also thank you very much for coming today and share such interesting story. And I hope that I can see a lot more like Vietnamese or Asian produce in not just like small store or like fruit store. I can see it in all the big supermarket here in Australia as well. So thank you so much for coming today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Vicky. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.